Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie with New Tricks Dog Training, and today I'm going to show you how to fit and size a prong collar and talk a little bit more about them. Here is an example of a prong collar. This is a Herm Springer, which is the only kind of prong collar I use. There are some cheaper alternatives, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, but they don't work quite as well. This is my preferred prong collar. You can see that they look pretty terrifying. There's, I think, a reason a lot of people kind of see them and are like, no thanks, I don't really want to learn more about them. They look a little bit like medieval torture devices. Even though they look scary, they're one of the most gentle options. If you Google it, a lot of dog chiropractors recommend them. If you can see this, they have beveled edges, so they're not sharp, they're not digging into your dog's neck. They're very, very safe when used correctly. And that's it. I'm gonna help you guys use them correctly. This one is a knockoff Herm Springer, and this is one I personally have used because I thought I'd try and save a few bucks. But you can see all of the prongs are all going in one direction. On a Herm Springer, there's a plate that sits at the front of the neck that's a little plate by the trachea, and then the prongs go in opposing directions. Herm Springers are a lot snappier. This is a little bulkier because it doesn't have like the same sort of plates. So I've been there, I've tried it, really recommend against it. But so that's what you can see, this plate and how it goes around the neck in opposing sides. You can see the plate at the base and how that movement is a little snappier. So you might be wondering, like, why not flat collars? Are choke collars the same? You may have heard that harnesses or gentle leaders, the head halties, are the best type of collar, but there's a lot of issues with those types of collars that aren't present in the Herm Springer prong or pinch collar, as they're sometimes called. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the alternatives that people use in place of a prong collars and the downsides to them and why I prefer to use prongs. First starting with, of course, flat buckle collars or martingales. And the big downside to using these is that over time it can cause trachea damage to your dog because it's creating a flat surface which your dog's neck is pulling against. And by and large, these don't stop most dogs from pulling. You'll see a lot of trainers tell people to just stop moving and the dog will pull, see that it won't get anywhere, and then eventually stop pulling. And I've seen for most dogs that this isn't necessarily true. It's not aversive enough to stop a dog from pulling. They're having a good time. They don't necessarily care that they're not getting as close as they wanted. And for all but kind of the softest dogs, this really won't do much. Next up are choke chains. The big con is that they're pretty forceful and can also cause trachea damage over time. There's also harnesses, which are probably one of the most popular options I see when people have problems with their dogs pulling. The big downside is that this is actually the strongest part of your dog. So you're essentially ending up creating your little one-person sled pulling team because your dog is now pulling from the strongest part of its body. So this usually doesn't stop the dog from pulling because it's essentially easier for it to pull now. And it actually ends up causing neck or shoulder damage when you use what's considered the right kind of harness, the kind that clips to the front and spins the dog towards you when it's trying to pull away. So that the torque of that can cause like joint damage at the neck and shoulder. And then, the back clip ones, once again, are just teaching your dog that it can pull and that it's easier now. There's also head halties. The popular brand, I think, is Gentle Leader, which is unfortunate because these are very aversive for most dogs. There's no off switch on them, which means that even when the dog is doing something correctly, it still has it on and it's still uncomfortable. There's usually a really long kind of initial introduction period, and when a dog pulls on these, it can create neck damage because of the torque, and the way the dog's neck snaps towards you isn't very gentle at all. So some of the downsides with prong collars are that you need to use a backup collar, like a flat buckle, and I'll teach you guys how to attach one, but they're not safe to be used alone. The prongs can sometimes come loose, and you don't want your dog to be released in a dicey situation, so you need a backup. And also, like I mentioned before, they look pretty terrifying. I think it's off-putting to a lot of people because they look like a torture device, so people seem a little hesitant to learn more about them. But luckily, the pros heavily outweigh the cons in this situation. Prong collars require the least amount of force to stop a dog from pulling. So unlike a flat buckle where your dog is exerting a lot of energy and pressure pulling against the collar, this uses about a finger's worth of pressure, so even though they look scary, they're the gentlest option. Once again, because of the way they look, you'll hear horror stories about dogs impaling themselves, owners freaking out, and how could this have happened type scenarios. And as long as you're using the right kind of prong collar, like the Herm Springer, where the edges are beveled and rounded, it's probably virtually impossible for this to happen unless you're trying to actually harm your dog. There's no way to accidentally impale a dog with a Herm Springer. And these also reduce or entirely stop pulling. So they actually work. And there's also the on-off switch. When used correctly, you're teaching your dog what pressure on, pressure off means. So it won't be an entirely aversive experience to the dog like a head halter, gentle leader would. There's an on-off switch for them. So now I'm going to go over how the prong collar works a little bit more and show you the different sizes. This one is a 2.25. I've also seen it listed as a 12 millimeter, I think. But the way they work is it pinches in and out. So it's not pinching your dog's neck, it's pinching in and out of these little holes to go on and off. There is a quick release one, but I don't recommend using those because if your dog is accidentally quick released into traffic, there's probably going to be some problems. I'll talk a little bit more about safety backups in case, even without a quick release, in case something does happen. So we'll go over some pup safety so that they pinch in and out. And you can buy extra prongs if the way it comes isn't big enough for your dog's neck. So you would just take one of these and pinch it in. And then voila. And the same thing goes if your dog has a neck that's smaller than the way it comes. You just pinch a link out and then continue to put it back. And then this big guy is a 3 millimeter. This one is for big dogs. So the 2.25 is for small, medium dogs. This is for big dogs. And sometimes medium, large dogs that are really, really fluffy. So there are some dogs where you might have to buy both and kind of try it out depending on the size and fluff of your dog. Again, you can buy extra links for the big one too. They come in little packs of like 2 or 3. I always just pick up a few in case. You can measure out your dog. I think they list on the website. I get mine off of Chewy, I think is the cheapest as of this video. Pretty sure they have like the full measurement on it. So if you're someone who isn't lazy, you can measure your dog's neck and try and figure out their size. There are micro prongs available for very small dogs. I don't have one to show you right now, but it's kind of like one like this. It's not a Herm Springer. It's not optimal, but Herm Springer doesn't have a micro prong collar option at this time. But some people have had success using a 2.25 on their very small dogs. I think I've seen one particular dog where it was a total of 4 prongs. 4 prongs or 4 links. It's very, very small, but it worked for that dog, so it might be worth trying the Herm Springer first still. So let me show you how to fit a prong collar on my dog Ellie.